The restaurant's amber lighting should have felt warm, romantic even, but to Juliet, it felt like she was sitting under an interrogation lamp. Across from her, Marcus, tall, well-dressed, charming on paper, smiled as he recounted some story about his last trip to the Hamptons. She wasn't listening. Her fingers trembled slightly as they wrapped around the stem of her wine glass. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. It wasn't Marcus himself, though his eyes had a peculiar way of watching her, like he was memorizing her face for some purpose she couldn't name. It was the restaurant. The other diners had gradually thinned out over the past 20 minutes, and the waitstaff had become scarce, disappearing into the kitchen and not returning. The exits suddenly felt very far away. Juliet's phone sat face down on the white tablecloth. She reached for it, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Excuse me for just 1 second," she murmured, not waiting for Marcus's response. Her thumbs moved quickly across the screen. "This date feels wrong. Something's off. I'm leaving soon." Joan's reply came instantly. "Want me to call you with a fake emergency?" Before Juliet could type yes, the restaurant's front door opened with such force that it slammed against the wall. The remaining diners looked up, their conversations dying mid-sentence. A gust of cold February wind swept through the space, making the candles flicker and dance. And then he walked in. The man commanded attention without saying a word. He wore an immaculate black suit that probably cost more than Juliet's monthly rent, his silver hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes, dark, calculating, absolutely merciless, that made Juliet's blood run cold. 3 men in similar suits flanked him, their hands conspicuously hidden inside their jackets. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The man's gaze swept the room once before settling directly on Juliet. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and to Juliet's absolute horror, he bowed slightly. Bowed. "Mr. Jong," Marcus said, his voice suddenly stripped of its earlier confidence. "She's here as requested." The words hit Juliet like a physical blow. "As requested. You may leave," Jong said quietly, not taking his eyes off Juliet. It wasn't a suggestion. Marcus practically ran from the table, and Juliet watched him disappear through the kitchen doors, her mind reeling. This had been a setup. The entire date had been a setup. But why? For what? Jong approached her table with measured steps, each footfall deliberate. His bodyguards moved to the exits, and Juliet heard the distinct click of locks turning. Her phone buzzed violently against the table, Joan calling. But when Juliet reached for it, Jong's hand shot out, faster than she expected, pressing it flat against the tablecloth. "I wouldn't answer that," he said, his accent crisp and his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Not yet." "Who the hell are you?" Juliet demanded, trying to keep her voice steady even as panic clawed at her throat. "What do you want from me?" Jong pulled out Marcus's abandoned chair and sat down with unsettling grace, folding his hands on the table. Up close, she could see the thin scar that ran along his jawline, the coldness in his eyes that suggested he'd seen and done terrible things. "You don't know me, Juliet Carter," he said, and hearing her full name from his lips made her skin crawl. "But I know you. I know your gallery on Madison Avenue. I know your girlfriend Joan teaches comparative literature at Columbia. I know you take the same route to work every morning, stopping at the cafe on 67th for an oat milk latte." Each detail was a knife, cutting away her sense of safety. I know, Jong continued, leaning forward slightly, exactly who your father was, and I know the debt he left behind. Juliet's phone continued buzzing, Joan calling again. The sound felt like a lifeline slipping further and further from reach. My father, Juliet's voice cracked. My father died 8 years ago. He was a very clever man who thought he could steal from me and disappear into obscurity, Jong finished. He was wrong. He reached into his jacket, and Juliet's entire body tensed, but what he pulled out was a photograph. He slid it across the table. The image showed her father, younger than she remembered him, standing beside Jong outside what looked like a warehouse. They weren't smiling. Your father owed me $15 million when he died, Jong said simply. Now, Juliet, you owe me $15 million, plus interest. The room tilted. $15 million. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. I don't have that kind of money, she whispered. I know. Jong's expression didn't change. But you have something else. Something your father promised me years ago, hidden somewhere only his blood can access. And you're going to help me find it, or... Her phone rang again. Joan. Always Joan, faithful and loving and completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding. Jong's eyes flickered to the buzzing phone, then back to Juliet's face. Answer it, he said. Tell her you're fine. Tell her you'll be home late. And Juliet. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. If you say anything else, if you give her even a hint of what's happening here, I'll have someone at her apartment within 5 minutes. Do you understand? Juliet's hand shook as she reached for the phone, Jong's cold gaze never leaving her face. She could barely breathe as her finger hovered over the answer button. This was no longer just a wrong date. This was a trap she'd walked into 8 years in the making, and there was no way out. Wait, before we see what's in that storage unit. Quick question, where are you watching from and are you ready for this? Because what happens next will blow your mind. If you're already invested in Juliet's survival, hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single twist. Share this with someone who loves psychological thrillers. Now let's see what her father left behind. Juliet's finger froze over the answer button as a memory crashed through her mind with devastating clarity. Jules, baby, listen to me very carefully. She was 17 again, standing in their cramped Brooklyn kitchen. Her father had come home late, his shirt stained with something dark that he'd insisted was motor oil. His hands, those steady, artist's hands that had taught her to appreciate Basquiat and Rothko, were shaking as he gripped her shoulders. If anything ever happens to me, you stay away from the art world. You hear me. You become a teacher, a doctor, anything else. Promise me. Dad, you're scaring me. Promise me, Juliet. She'd promised, and then she'd broken that promise the moment she'd opened her gallery 3 years ago. Answer the phone, Juliet. Jong's voice snapped her back to the present. Now. She pressed the button, her voice barely her own. Hey, babe. Jules, thank God. Are you okay? You sounded weird in your text. I'm fine, Juliet lied, the words tasting like ash. Jong's men had positioned themselves at every exit, their jackets open just enough to reveal the weapons beneath. The date just ran long. I'll be home late, okay? Don't wait up. Are you sure I can come get you? No. The word came out too sharp. Juliet forced herself to breathe. No, I'm fine. Really, I love you. She ended the call before Joan could argue, before the tremor in her voice could give everything away. Jong nodded approvingly. Good. You're smarter than your father. he never knew when to cooperate. What did my father do? The question ripped out of her. He was a janitor at the Met. He cleaned floors and— Is that what he told you? Jong's laugh was cold, humorless. Your father was one of the most talented art forgers in the Western Hemisphere. The Vermeer that sold at Sotheby's for $18 million in 2015, your father's work. The lost Caravaggio discovered in a French attic. Also your father's work. He made me very, very wealthy. The words didn't compute. Her father had lived modestly, died modestly. They'd barely had enough for his funeral. But then another memory surfaced, sharper now. Her father in his basement studio. She'd thought it was just a hobby space, bent over a canvas with brushes so fine they could paint individual hairs. The way he'd hidden those paintings whenever she came downstairs. The strange men who'd occasionally visited late at night, leaving with carefully wrapped packages. You have your father's eye, baby girl. That's dangerous. Don't let anyone know you can spot the real from the fake. No, Juliet whispered. No, he wouldn't. He did. Jong slid another photograph across the table. This one showed her father standing in front of a wall of paintings, each one a masterpiece she recognized from art history textbooks. For 15 years, he created perfect forgeries. We sold them to collectors who wanted to evade taxes, to criminals who needed to launder money, to museums who wanted to appear more prestigious than they were. Juliet's hands clenched into fists. Then what happened? Why did he stop? He got greedy, sloppy. Jong's expression hardened. He created one final piece, something so valuable, so perfect, that it could destabilize the entire international art market if it ever came to light. And then he tried to keep it for himself. He hid it before I could claim what was mine. I don't know anything about a painting. Not a painting. Jong leaned forward, and Juliet saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. A collection, 12 pieces. Each one a perfect forgery of a lost masterpiece, each one indistinguishable from the original. Together, they're worth $500 million. Your father called it his insurance policy. He said if anything happened to him, his daughter would know where to find it. The restaurant suddenly felt suffocating. He never told me about any collection. I swear. Then perhaps this will jog your memory. Jong produced a small device from his pocket, pressed a button. A screen on the wall flickered to life, showing surveillance footage. Juliet's breath caught. It was her apartment. Her and Joan's apartment. The footage was from tonight. She could see Joan curled up on their couch, reading, completely unaware she was being watched. I have 3 men stationed outside your building, Jong said conversationally. 2 more in the apartment across the hall. I've had eyes on you for 6 months, Juliet, waiting for the right moment, waiting to see if you'd lead me to your father's collection naturally, but you've been frustratingly innocent. Please. Juliet's voice broke. Joan has nothing to do with this. She doesn't know anything about my father, about any of this. Then I suggest you start remembering very quickly. Jong stood, buttoning his jacket. You have 72 hours to find your father's collection and deliver it to me. If you go to the police, Joan dies. If you run, Joan dies. If you fail to find what I'm looking for. He let the sentence hang. I don't even know where to start. Yes, you do. Jong moved toward the door, his men falling into formation around him. Your father was sentimental. He left you clues, breadcrumbs. You just have to look. He paused at the threshold, glancing back. Oh, and Juliet, check your father's storage unit. The one in Red Hook you've been paying for since his death but have never visited." Her blood turned to ice. How did he know about that? 72 hours, Jong repeated. "Starting now." The door closed behind him with a soft click, the locks disengaging. The remaining diners, clearly Jong's people, filed out silently, leaving Juliet alone in the empty restaurant. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, a photo of Joan through their apartment window, sitting peacefully, alive, unaware. Below it, tick-tock. Juliet's hands shook as she grabbed her coat. The storage unit. Her father had made her promise to keep paying for it, had made her swear never to let it go. "One day, baby girl, you'll understand. One day, you'll need what's in there." She'd thought he'd just been sentimental about his old art supplies. But as she stepped into the cold February night, Juliet realized with sickening certainty that her father had been preparing her for this moment all along. He'd trained her eye, taught her to see what others couldn't, given her every tool she'd need. Except the truth. And now she had 72 hours to uncover a secret her father had died protecting, or the woman she loved would pay the price. Her phone buzzed again. "Joan, miss you already, can't wait till you're home. Read." Juliet closed her eyes against the tears threatening to fall. She couldn't go home. Not yet. Not until she understood what her father had done, what he'd hidden, and why he'd made her the keeper of a secret she'd never known existed. The storage unit was 20 minutes away. She started running. The storage facility in Red Hook loomed like a prison in the darkness, its corrugated metal walls slick with rain that had started falling the moment Juliet left the restaurant. Her hands trembled as she punched in the code. Her father's birthday, the same code he'd made her memorize years ago, and the gate groaned open. Unit 347, third floor. She'd been paying $200 a month for 8 years for a space she'd never entered. The elevator reeked of rust and neglect. As it lurched upward, Juliet's phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She answered without thinking. "What do you want now?" "To make sure you're being a good girl." Jong's voice was silk over steel. "I assume you've arrived at your father's little time capsule." Juliet's stomach dropped. "You're watching me." "I told you, Juliet. I've been watching you for years. Did you think I was exaggerating?" A pause, waved to the camera above the elevator buttons. She looked up. A small lens glinted in the corner, red light blinking steadily. Her skin crawled. "How long?" She demanded. "How long have you been watching me?" "Since you were 18. Jong's tone was almost conversational. "The day you moved into your first apartment in Manhattan, I had it wired. Every apartment since. Your gallery has 14 cameras. I know what you eat for breakfast, what side of the bed you sleep on, how many times a week you and Joan make love." "Stop," the word came out strangled. "Please just stop." "I needed to be sure," Jong continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Sure that you truly knew nothing. Sure that your father hadn't whispered secrets to you on his deathbed. Sure that you weren't playing your own game." The elevator shuddered to a halt, but you were. Genuinely clueless, refreshingly innocent, it was almost disappointing. Juliet stepped into the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps echoing. "Then why now? Why come after me if you know I don't have what you want?" "Because you turned 25 last month." She froze at unit 347, her key halfway to the lock. "What does my age have to do with anything?" "Everything." Jong's voice dropped lower. "Your father was superstitious. He believed in signs, in numerology. 25 was his lucky number. the age he painted his first masterpiece, the age he met your mother, the age he started working for me. He told me once, years before he betrayed me, that if anything ever happened to him, his daughter would understand everything when she turned 25. Juliet's hand shook so badly she could barely fit the key in the lock. That's insane. He never told me anything about. Open the unit, Juliet. The lock clicked. The door rolled upward with a metallic screech. Inside was darkness and the smell of turpentine and old canvas. Juliet fumbled for the light switch. Fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing a space that made her knees buckle. It wasn't a storage unit. It was a fully equipped art studio. Easels stood like sentinels throughout the space, each holding a covered canvas. Shelves lined the walls, packed with paints, brushes, chemicals, reference books. In the center sat a desk, and on that desk, a laptop so old it still had a disk drive, and a single envelope with her name written in her father's distinctive handwriting. "Do you see it now?" Jong asked, his voice in her ear like a devil's whisper. "Your inheritance." Juliet walked toward the envelope as if in a trance. Her fingers brushed the paper expensive, heavy stock, and she noticed something else. A date written in the corner, her 25th birthday. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew exactly when I'd find this. Your father was many things, a liar, a thief, a coward who chose death over facing me. But he wasn't stupid." Jong paused. "Open it." Juliet tore the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in her father's handwriting. "My dearest Jules. If you're reading this, I'm gone and you've just turned 25. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I'm about to ask of you. The collection Jong wants doesn't exist. Not yet. I never created it because I knew he'd kill me the moment I delivered it. So I did something else. I left you everything you need to create it yourself. The reference materials, the techniques, the contacts. You have my eye, baby girl, you have my hands, you have my gift. The 12 pieces must be perfect. Any flaw, any mistake, and Jong will know. He'll kill you and he'll kill anyone you love. You have 3 options. 1. Create the collection and give it to him. Buy your freedom with forgery. 2. Run and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. 3. Go to the police and watch everyone you love die. I'm sorry I made you my legacy. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this world. But Jules, if you choose to create the collection, know this. I've hidden one final piece of insurance in the 12th painting. Something that will destroy Jong's empire if he ever discovers what it is. A trap within the trap. The choice is yours. I love you, I'm sorry, Dad. Juliet's hands were numb. The letter fell to the floor. Well, Jong's voice was expectant. What does it say? She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Her father hadn't left her a collection. He'd left her an impossible task and a ticking time bomb. Juliet, what does it say? She looked around the studio again, seeing it with new eyes. The covered canvases, they were blank, waiting for her to fill them. The reference books, detailed studies of lost masterpieces. The laptop probably contained her father's techniques, his secrets, everything he'd never taught her directly. He left instructions, she heard herself say, for creating the collection. Silence on the other end. Then, how long will it take you? I don't know. I'm not a forger, I'm a curator. You have 72 hours. Jong's voice turned to ice. I suggest you learn quickly. That's impossible. It takes months to create a single convincing forgery, and you want 12 masterpieces in 3 days. Then I suggest you don't sleep. don't eat, don't waste time. A pause, and Juliet. I'm sending someone to help motivate you. What do you mean? The line went dead. Juliet spun around just as she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful, multiple sets. Her heart hammered as shadows appeared in the doorway. 3 men in dark suits, and between them. No, Juliet breathed. No, no, no. Joan stood there, her hands bound in front of her, duct tape across her mouth, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. One of the men, the largest, with a scar bisecting his cheek, smiled. Mr. Jong thought you might work. Better with your girlfriend here, you know, for inspiration. He pulled out a gun, pressed it casually against Joan's temple. You have 72 hours to create 12 perfect forgeries. Every 6 hours, we cut off one of her fingers. When you run out of fingers. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Joan made a muffled sound behind the tape, tears streaming down her face as she looked at Juliet with desperate, questioning eyes. What's happening? Why is this happening? Juliet's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, the weight of her father's legacy crushing down on her like a physical thing. 72 hours, 12 masterpieces, 10 fingers. The man with the scar checked his watch. Clock's ticking, Miss Carter, I suggest you start painting. Behind him, one of the other men wheeled in a cage, an actual cage, the kind used for large dogs, and shoved Joan inside, locking it with a heavy padlock. Juliet looked at the blank canvases, then at Joan's terrified face, then at her father's letter still lying on the floor. A trap within a trap. She didn't know how to forge masterpieces. She didn't know if she could create even one convincing piece in 3 days, let alone 12. But as she stood on shaking legs and walked toward the first easel, one truth crystallized with brutal clarity. She was about to find out exactly how much of her father's darkness lived inside her, and whether love was worth becoming the monster he'd trained her to be. Hour 12. Juliet's hands were cramping, her eyes burning from the chemical fumes and lack of sleep. She'd managed to lay down the base layers for 3 canvases, a supposed lost Vermeer, a rediscovered Caravaggio, and a Rembrandt that had allegedly burned in a Berlin museum fire in 1945. They looked like garbage, amateur recreations that wouldn't fool a first-year art student, let alone a man who'd built an empire on forgeries. In the cage behind her, Joan had finally stopped crying. Now she just stared, her eyes hollow with fear and exhaustion. The guards had removed her gag an hour ago after she'd vomited from terror, but Joan hadn't spoken. What could she possibly say? I'm sorry felt inadequate. I'll get us out of this felt like a lie. Juliet's phone buzzed. A text from the scarred guard whose name she'd learned was Minjun, 6 hours down, time for the first finger. No, Juliet whirled around, paintbrush still in hand. No, please, I need more time. I'm working as fast as I can. Minjun was already unlocking the cage, pulling Joan out by her bound wrists. Joan struggled, finding her voice at last. Jules, what is this? What's happening? Why are these men? Hold her down, Minjun ordered the other guards. They forced Joan onto the desk, slamming her hand flat against the wood. Minjun produced a pair of bolt cutters from his jacket, the metal gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Stop! Juliet launched herself forward, but one of the guards caught her, slamming her against the wall hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Please, please, I just need. You need motivation, Minjun said calmly, positioning the bolt cutters around Joan's pinky finger. Joan's scream was primal, animal. Juliet, what did you do? What did you? The words that came out of Juliet's mouth surprised even her. I'll tell you where the real collection is. Minjun paused, the bolt cutter still in place. What did you say? Juliet's mind raced, improvising wildly. The letter, my father's letter. There was a second page. He hid the collection before he died. I know where it is. You don't need me to paint anything. The pieces already exist. It was a desperate lie, one that would buy her maybe an hour before they discovered the truth. But an hour was better than watching them mutilate the woman she loved. Minjun's eyes narrowed. He pulled out his phone, stepped away. Juliet could hear him speaking rapid Korean, presumably to Jong. The conversation lasted 30 seconds. Then Minjun returned, his expression unreadable. Mr. Jong wants to speak with you, now in person. He grabbed Juliet's arm roughly. Let's go. What about Joan? She stays, insurance. Minjun nodded to the other guards. If Ms. Carter isn't back in 2 hours with proof of this collection, start cutting. No, please. Juliet tried to pull away, but Minjun's grip was iron. You should have told us this 12 hours ago, he said, dragging her toward the door. Now Mr. Jong is very, very interested in why you were wasting our time. They shoved Juliet into a black Mercedes, waiting outside the storage facility. The city lights blurred past as they drove through Manhattan, heading downtown. Juliet's mind spun through possibilities, escape plans, anything that might save them. But every scenario ended the same way, with Joan dead and Juliet joining her. The car stopped in front of a building Juliet recognized with a jolt of sick irony, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where her father had worked. Where this nightmare had begun decades ago. Mr. Jong is waiting in the European paintings wing, Minjun said. Closed for private renovation. How convenient. They entered through a service entrance, Minjun's credentials getting them past the night security without question. How deep did Jong's influence run? The hallways were dark, empty, their footsteps echoing off marble floors. They found Jong standing in front of Vermeer's young woman with a water pitcher, one of the Met's most prized possessions. He didn't turn as they approached. Your father used to bring you here, Jong said quietly. Every Sunday afternoon, you'd stand in front of this painting for hours. Do you remember? Juliet did remember. Her father studying the brushstrokes, the way light played across the woman's face, the precise ratio of pigments needed to achieve that particular shade of yellow. She'd thought he was teaching her to appreciate art. He'd been teaching her to replicate it. Tell me about this collection. Jong finally turned to face her, the one that supposedly already exists. Juliet's mouth went dry. She had nothing. No lie elaborate enough to sustain itself. But then her eyes landed on the painting behind Jong, and a wild, desperate idea formed. It's hidden here, she said. In the Met. My father had access to the storage vaults. He replaced 12 pieces in the permanent collection with his forgeries years ago. The real paintings, the ones you want, there in a private vault. Only I know the access code. Jong's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, calculation. Which 12 pieces? Juliet's mind raced through her father's favorite paintings, the ones he'd forced her to memorize. The Vermeer behind you. The Rembrandt self-portrait on the second floor. The Caravaggio musicians, 9 others. You're saying the Met has been displaying forgeries for years. Perfect forgeries. No one knows, no one could ever know. That was my father's insurance, proof of his genius. If you expose them, you expose yourself. If you keep them hidden, you have leverage over one of the world's most prestigious museums. It was insane. It was impossible. But Jong was listening. "Show me the vault," he said. "I need Joan released first." "You're not in a position to negotiate." Jong nodded to Minjun. "We go to the vault. If she's lying, call your men. Start with both of Joan's hands." They walked through the darkened museum, Juliet leading them deeper into the building, toward the basement storage areas. Her father had brought her down here once, years ago, during a special staff event. She remembered the layout, the security, Her foot hit something on the floor. She looked down. A guard's body, his throat cut, blood pooling beneath him. "What?" Juliet stumbled backward. More bodies. 3 more guards, all dead, all recent. The blood was still warm. Jong pulled a gun from his jacket, his entire demeanor shifting from cultured businessman to something far more dangerous. "We're not alone." A slow clap echoed through the hallway. A woman's voice, accented and amused. "Very good, Jong. I was wondering when you'd notice." From the shadows emerged a figure that made Juliet's blood run cold. A woman in her 50s, elegant in a white suit now spattered with blood, flanked by her own team of armed operatives. "Park Yeon-jin," Jong breathed, his gun rising. "This is not your business." "Oh, but it is." The woman, Yeon-jin, smiled. "Did you really think you were the only one interested in Carter's collection? I've been tracking his daughter for just as long as you have, waiting, watching." Her eyes landed on Juliet. "And now, she's going to work for me instead." Guns appeared from everywhere. Jong's men, Yeon-jin's men, a Mexican standoff in the basement of the Met with Juliet caught in the center. "The girl comes with me," Yeon-jin said. "Unless you want your entire operation exposed to Interpol. I have documentation of every forgery you've sold for the past 20 years. One phone call, and you're finished." "I'll kill her before I let you take her," Jong countered. "Then neither of us gets the collection." Juliet's mind reeled. 2 rival criminals, both claiming her. Both willing to kill for what her father had created or what they thought he'd created. And Joan was still in that storage unit, waiting to be mutilated. "Enough," the word tore out of Juliet before she could stop herself. "You want the collection? Fine, but not like this. Not with threats and guns and—" "Quiet girl," Yeonjin snapped. Something inside Juliet broke. The fear, the exhaustion, the rage at her father for leaving her this legacy, it all crystallized into a single, reckless moment of clarity. "No," she said, "you both want something only I can give you. That makes me valuable. That gives me leverage." She looked between them. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to release Joan. You're going to give me 1 week, not 3 days, 1 week to create what you want. And you're both going to leave us alone until then." "Or what?" Jong's gun didn't waver. "Or I destroy every reference material my father left. Every technique, every formula, every secret. You'll never get your collection, and you'll both lose whatever war you're fighting." The silence stretched taut as a wire, then Yeonjin laughed. "She has her father's nerve, I like that." She lowered her gun. 1 week, but the girlfriend stays with me." "Insurance." "No," Juliet started. Jong's phone rang. He answered it, his face going pale. "What do you mean she's gone?" Juliet's heart stopped. "Your men at the storage unit are dead," Jong said slowly, his eyes on Yeon-jin. "And Joan has vanished." "Not my people," Yeon-jin said, but uncertainty flickered across her face. A third voice crackled through Jong's phone speaker, distorted and mechanical. Looking for the girlfriend. She's with me now. And if Juliet Carter wants to see her alive again, she'll meet me at the address I'm texting her. Alone, in 30 minutes. Juliet's phone buzzed, an address in Brooklyn, and a photo. Joan, unconscious in the back of a van, a new captor. A third player in this deadly game. And a message, your father owed me too, time to pay his debts. The address led to a warehouse in Red Hook, less than 2 miles from her father's storage unit. Juliet arrived with Jong and Yeonjin both trailing her, an uneasy alliance born of mutual desperation. Neither trusted the other. Neither trusted Juliet. But they all wanted Joan back for different reasons. Jong needed leverage. Yeonjin needed insurance. Juliet just needed Joan alive. This is a trap, Jong muttered as they approached the rusted metal building. Obviously. Then we spring it together, Yeonjin replied, checking her weapon. Better odds. Juliet didn't wait for their permission. She pushed through the warehouse door. Inside, the space had been transformed into a gallery. Her father's paintings, the real ones, not forgeries, lined the walls. Pieces Juliet had never seen, works he'd hidden from the world. Masterpieces that bore his signature in the corner, small and proud. Carter, not forgeries. Original works. Art her father had created from his own genius, his own vision. And in the center of it all, tied to a chair beneath a single spotlight, was Joan, still unconscious, still bleeding from the earlier wound. Welcome home, Juliet. The voice came from above. Juliet looked up to see a figure standing on the catwalk, a black woman in her 60s, elegant and terrifying in equal measure, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Juliet's world tilted. Mom. Hello, baby girl. Her mother, Diane Carter, who had supposedly died of cancer when Juliet was 12, descended the metal stairs with measured grace. I've been waiting for this moment for 13 years. You're dead, Juliet whispered. You died. I was at your funeral. You were at a closed casket funeral because your father was a sentimental fool who couldn't let you know the truth. Diane reached the ground floor, and Juliet saw the gun in her hand. I'm not dead, Jules. I'm just done playing by your father's rules. Jong stepped forward, his own weapon raised. Diane Carter, the widow, I should have known. You should have, Diane agreed. My husband built an empire on forgeries, but I built a real one. Art theft, smuggling, international trafficking of cultural treasures. While he was playing dress-up with fake Vermeers, I was stealing the real ones. Juliet's legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed against a support beam. No, you're lying. Your father was weak, Diane continued, circling Joan's unconscious form like a predator. He felt guilty about what we did. Started talking about leaving the life, going legitimate. He thought he could protect you from this world. She laughed, bitter and cold. So I staged my death. Let him think he'd won. And I've been building my empire in the shadows ever since, waiting for you to grow up. Waiting for you to be ready. Ready for what? Juliet's voice cracked. To take over. Diane gestured to the paintings around them. These are your father's originals, his real legacy, not the forgeries Jong wants, not the fake collection he promised. These paintings represent billions in the black market, and they're yours, Juliet, your inheritance. Yeonjin moved to flank Jong, both of them reassessing the threat. The widow wants the girl for herself, Yeonjin said, to run her operation. I want my daughter to claim what's rightfully hers, Diane corrected. James Carter was brilliant, but he was afraid of his own power. You're not, are you, Jules? I've watched you build your gallery, watched you spot forgeries that fool experts, watched you negotiate with collectors and dealers. You have his gift and my ruthlessness. I'm nothing like you, Juliet spat. Then explain why you're still standing here instead of running to the police. Diane's smile was, knowing you could have gone to the FBI at any point, could have exposed all of us, but you didn't. Because deep down you know the truth, you belong in this world. Joan stirred, groaning. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and terrified. Jules. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Touching, Diane said. Now choose, join me, take control of my empire, and I'll let Joan live. Refuse, and Jong gets his collection, Yeonjin gets her revenge, and your girlfriend bleeds out in the next 60 seconds. You're bluffing, Juliet said, but her voice shook. Diane pulled the hammer back on her gun, pressing it against Joan's temple. Am I? Wait, Jong stepped forward. There's another option, one your mother hasn't considered. Oh. Diane didn't lower her weapon. The girl works for all of us. Jong's mind was clearly racing, calculating. She creates forgeries for me, steals originals for Yeonjin, runs legitimate sales through her mother's network. We divide the profits equally. No one dies, everyone wins. Except Juliet, Yeonjin added. She becomes our slave. She becomes rich, Jong corrected. Powerful, protected. What's slavery when you're living in a penthouse and controlling the global art market? Juliet looked at Joan, at her mother, at the two crime bosses offering her different versions of hell. Then she looked at her father's paintings on the walls. His originals, his truth, and she understood. You're all wrong about my father, Juliet said quietly. He wasn't weak. He was smart, smarter than any of you. She walked to the nearest painting, a stunning landscape that seemed to glow from within. These aren't worth billions because they're originals. They're worth billions because they're evidence. She turned the painting around. On the back was a USB drive, sealed in waterproof plastic and adhered to the frame. He documented everything, Juliet continued, moving to the next painting, revealing another USB drive. Every forgery he created, every sale, every client, every dirty deal all three of you made. Names, dates, bank accounts, photographs. She met her mother's eyes, including proof that you faked your death to evade a murder charge in Hong Kong. Diane's face went white. He told me in the letter, Juliet lied, her voice steady now. He said if I ever found his originals, I'd find his insurance, information that could destroy all of you, and he made me the executor. She pulled the USB drive free, held it up. So here's my choice. I walk out of here with Joan, you all leave us alone, forever, and these drives stay hidden. Or I send everything to Interpol, the FBI, the CIA, and every major news outlet simultaneously. Your empires crumble, your lives end. You're bluffing, Jong said, but he didn't sound certain. Try me. Juliet's hand moved to her phone. I've already uploaded the contents to a cloud server with a dead man's switch. If I don't check in every 12 hours, everything goes public automatically. Another lie, but they didn't know that. Silence filled the warehouse. Diane lowered her gun slowly. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. I'm my father's daughter, Juliet replied, and my mother's. I learned from the best. She moved to Joan, cutting her bonds with a knife from one of the guards' bodies. Joan collapsed into her arms, sobbing. We're leaving, Juliet said. Don't follow us, don't contact us, don't even think about us. Because if anything happens to Joan or me, a car accident, a mugging, anything, those files go public. Understand? Yeonjin nodded slowly. Jong's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. Diane just smiled. This isn't over, baby girl. You can't run from who you are forever. Watch me, Juliet said. She half-carried Joan toward the exit, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. 20 feet, 10 feet, 5, they made it outside. Juliet dragged Joan toward the street, toward the lights, toward safety. Her mother's voice carried through the night. You have 1 week, Juliet. 1 week before I decide whether you're my daughter or my enemy. Juliet didn't look back. She flagged down a taxi, gave the driver her address, held Joan as she shook and cried and demanded answers Juliet couldn't give. But as the warehouse disappeared behind them, Juliet's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, impressive performance. But we both know you don't have those files. Your father destroyed them before he died, I made sure of that. So here's what happens next. You have 72 hours to deliver the collection, or I expose your mother to Jong and Yeonjin. They'll tear her apart and you'll watch. Then they'll come for you. An old friend of your father's. Below it, a photo that made Juliet's blood run cold.